Hi, everyone, and welcome to Autism Hope Library. We have a real treat today. I'm so excited about our next guest. Bob Doman is the founder and director of NACD, and he is a wealth of knowledge. I've known him for many years, and I always learn something new. Today, we're going to be talking about a really, really important topic. We're going to be talking about the neuroplasticity, how to wire and rewire a brain, working with the whole child, and this is the most important, at any age, and that can help change the outcome. So thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure, Kristen. Thanks. Great to be.
I'm excited. I just think that ever since I've met you and we talk about neuroplasticity, it's just one of those topics that I feel, especially in the autism community, we don't talk about enough, because I feel that, learning from you and learning what the brain is capable of doing, it just blows my mind. No pun intended, but actually pun intended.
Got it.
So let's talk about, for those that are watching or listening, what is neuroplasticity?
Neuroplasticity is that which permits us to grow and develop. Whether we're talking about a typical child, a child with issues, a child on the spectrum, all of us grow because of the power of neuroplasticity. All right. If you will, what changes an infant and causes not just them to change and develop, but actually their brains to physically grow, is neuroplasticity. All right. So if you will, simply, if we stimulate a brain with specific appropriate input, with sufficient frequency, often enough, sufficient intensity, strong enough input over a long enough period of time, we literally grow and change the brain. We grow connections between the neurons, the brain cells, and physically cause the growth of the brain, organization of the brain, and development of the individual. All right, if you will, the difference between a baby and a year-old, a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, so on, is a reflection of the stimulation that brain has received. All right, and then the development. We don't develop because we get older. Mm-hmm. All right. Matter of fact, age is not our friend. All right. I can tell you at my age is not our friend. And our kids don't improve because they get older. Our kids improve if we are providing them with good, specific, appropriate input with the sufficient frequency, intensity, and duration. All right. And if you will, neuroplasticity is kind of getting misused, to imply the brain changes. Yeah, the brain does change if we are applying the specific input that is appropriate for that child in that point of time with sufficient frequency, intensity, and duration.
It almost reminds me, as you're talking, of, when you go to the gym and you're trying to work out a muscle. Well, you can't just think about wanting to, maybe help your abs or your legs or your arms. You can't just think like, oh, I hope that I can be in better shape. You actually have to work that muscle, but you have to work it in specific ways, again, with that intensity, a duration, and, specific intentions. And it's interesting, as you're saying that, I think with our brain, we never think of it, often many people don't think of it as a muscle or a way to work it. And the way you're talking and the way you just described that kind of gave that, analogy in my brain. Would that be accurate?
It would, and we can take your analogy a step further. If you really want to do a good job at that gym, you have a personal trainer, mm-hmm. an expert to guide you, to look at the whole picture as you, and say, okay, right now, these are our priorities. And after we address those, and it's constantly changing mm-hmm. based on what's happening with you. And one of the really tragic realities for our kids is that no one's in charge. No one's looking at the big picture typically. Mm-hmm. No one's looking at the whole child. Mm-hmm. You've got people working with pieces. If you will, it's like trying to build a house without a contractor. Mm-hmm. All right, without a set of plans. Good luck. Mm-hmm. All right, and if you were trying to build a house that way, it'd be a disaster. Unfortunately, with what's happening with most of our kids on the spectrum, it's close to a disaster.
Because they're not having the right tools and the right guidance and the coach, really.
Yes. Yep.
So when you're talking about one of the things that I've heard you talk about is you've coined that term DSA, debilitating sensory addictions. For those that are watching, that could be a STEM, or sometimes in different therapies, they might call it ISM or STEMs. Can you tell us, what they are and how DSA impacts the neuroplasticity of that child's or individual's brain?
Yep. So if you will, the foundation of those on the spectrum is sensory dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
And the sensory dysfunction impacts the development. All right. So if you will, the brain has to process sensory input to trigger neuroplasticity. So to whatever degree our vision is screwed up, or our hearing, or our tactility, or our taste or smell, it's going to impact what input our brain is trying to process and what it's going to do with it. So if we have sensory issues, the sensory issues tend with children, and to varying degrees, to turn into stims, if you will. And if you will, a stim is the child abnormally using a sensory channel.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what happens with those stims is they become what we call debilitating sensory addictions, right? Debilitating meaning it's hurting them. Sensory, it's sensory based, and they literally become addictions. The brain reacts the same way it does to a drug addiction, any other addiction. And the more addictive you are, the more addictions you want. If you look at a kid who is really a addicted child, they would rather feed their addiction than eat or do anything. Right? That's how powerful they are. And if you will, what those things do is trigger what you can virtually call negative neuroplasticity. All right, because it's not just what externally gets put into our brain that determines how it gets wired. It's how we use it determines how it gets wired.
Mm-hmm.
So the more kids are engaged in these sensory addictive behaviors, the more they're wiring their brain improperly, all right, to, if you will, perceive the world improperly. And then their development goes sideways. And it goes from the sensory addictions to what we call perseverative addictions. All right, the child who wants to watch the same little video clip over and over again, child who wants to hear the same song over and over again. All right, those are the same kind of debilitating addictions that are stopping and prohibiting the normal development as we want it.
And so, when you're talking about that, I feel like with neuroplasticity, again, because most people aren't talking about it, we're not really using it the right way, with the tools that we have, right? That we can maybe help these kiddos, again, of any age on the spectrum. So what do we do about that? Like, why aren't we helping these kids?
Well, again, our children are not being perceived as whole individuals.
Mm-hmm.
They're being perceived as having a disease. Oh, Johnny's problem is he's autistic. Johnny's problem, he has Asperger's. All right. Having worked with kids on the spectrum for 50 years, I can tell you that every individual is incredibly complex.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And kind of the first thing you need to stop doing is looking at them as part of a group and looking at them as unique individuals and saying, okay, we have to understand that whole child, which is a teamwork of the parents and someone who's kind of guiding the whole show professionally.
Mm-hmm.
All right, to identify where their pieces are, what the big issues are. For example, at one point it may be a physiological issue is the biggest deal. At another point, it's the addictions. At another point, it's simply their behaviors. At another point, it's prompt dependency. At another point, it's lack of independence. Right? It's an incredibly complex deal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And if we go back to the discussion of a contractor, it's not like we're building the equivalent of a 1,000 square foot house. It's more like we're building a 100,000 square foot building. All right. It's very complex. There are a lot of pieces, and it takes a joint partnership between parents who become educated, the preferably person who oversees it all professionally, and then creates the program and pulls in pieces as they are needed.
So, what are some other really important things that parents need to know? Because I know as you're talking, when you're saying, hey, it's a 100,000 square foot building, and my first thought was, yeah, and it has like 19 doors on one floor and 17 doors on another, and 19 bathrooms, and it's like there's every little aspect that's in there, and it's custom design, right? So
Absolutely.
it's so as a parent and those that are listening, what else do they need to know about this really important topic?
Okay, well, the big thing is to perceive, every parent needs to perceive their child as being unique.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Your child never existed before, your child will never exist again. And your job as a parent is to understand your child as best you can with the professional guidance that you can get to help do that. And then start crawling into the pieces, which keep changing. Right? The priorities one week aren't the priorities the next week or the next month. And it keeps changing. And, parents, sadly, particularly parents of kids on the spectrum, keep looking for the magic pill. Gee, what's that thing that's going to fix it? All right. Well, I hate to tell every parent, there isn't a thing that's going to fix it. All right. It's not a disease which they can create a pill. It's not COVID and you get a vaccine for it. All right. It is a neurodevelopmental problem, and it takes addressing all of those pieces to have a shot at producing good outcomes and good results. And for every child, depending on the degree of issues they have, are going to determine, how we proceed. Mm-hmm. And what the outcomes are going to be. We do have those kids who were severely involved, who today no one would ever guess they had a label. All right. All kids don't have those outcomes. Mm-hmm. I'm working with one of my family just last week with the son I've known for 20 years, all right, and worked with for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I can remember the first time I saw this boy. This kid literally bounced around the tops of the furniture. All right. And he didn't look at his mother or I any differently than he looked at a chair. We were no more significant than something else he could bounce off of. All right. This kid had severe sensory issues. His processing was terrible. And I need to talk more about processing with you. All right. And today, he's not a superstar. All right. He doesn't have a college degree. He doesn't have a great job. But today he does have jobs. Today he is fairly independent. His mom had to leave town for 2 weeks and he was home alone and took care of all of his cooking, and it's functioned pretty darn well.
Yeah.
Not too shabby from the kid.
I'd be happy with that.
Okay. All right. So, there's different degrees of involvement, different degrees to which we can help, different times we can be intervening. Sooner the better, obviously. If we can start with the little kids, the prognosis is much better. All right. But, with all the kids at any age, even starting with adults, you can have a significant impact if you're doing the right things. Now, one significant piece I should have mentioned is sequential processing. Sequential processing, particularly auditory sequential processing, which is the ability to take in pieces of sequential information, which would be the equivalent of following a 1 versus a 2 versus a 3 versus a 4 versus a 5, so and so, step auditory direction. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you will, that one thing determines complexity of thought, determines short-term memory, determines working memory. And if you will, we can equate a child's sequential processing with their global development, their global maturity, where we expect their language to be. All right. And if you will, that one piece of information is incredibly important. And that one piece of information gives us a better picture of where that child is than anything else. You know, if I have a child who's 10 years old, who's processing a 2, I have a child who neurodevelopmentally is where I would have liked to have seen him when he was 2 going on 3 years of age. All right. And trying to do things appropriate for a 10-year-old is totally inappropriate for this child who neurodevelopmentally is 2. All right. And one of the realities, you can't cheat the system. All right. You've got to go from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to get there. You can't skip steps, and you can't jump. As much as you would like your child who behaves like he's 2 when he's 18 to behave like he's 18, it's not going to happen. You got to go from 2 to 3 to 4 and put those pieces together.
Yeah, I mean,
and you can do it.
I live that with my son, so I know.
Yeah. You can't cheat the system.
I really do wish you could cheat the system, though. I'm just going to say that out loud. And all the parents listening, I know we all feel that way, because I feel like you get this diagnosis, you don't know what to do, and you push pause, right? And then all of a sudden you wake up and your kid's 18 and you're like, how did that happen? He just got that diagnosis. But that 18-year-old often still likes things maybe a 5 or 6-year-old would like. And so you're trying to have this kind of staggered ladder where some things they like that are maybe 13 or 14, and then some things that are, 3 or 4. So you're trying to find that happy balance. And so I know that those that are listening and watching, just know that this program, NACD, National Academy of Child of Development, I think I got that right. Literally, they walk with you, they hold your hand, they're cheering for you, they're crying with you, they do everything with you to help you get that kind of staggered. Because I know I get a lot of emails that will tell me their children are staggered. So for those families out there, Bob, do we go backwards? Do we kind of figure out a customized plan? What's your advice to the staggered?
Yeah, when you say staggered, it's possible to, I could take a bunch of 2-year-olds and I could teach those 2-year-olds a variety of skills. All right. But they're still 2-year-olds.
Yep.
All right. And just because they've been taught splinter skills doesn't mean that they globally are changed. All right, you have to establish where the foundation is, sensory foundation is, the processing foundation is, and build from that. All right, again, you can't cheat.
Yeah. Nothing in life is free, and nothing in life you can cheat. No. It sure seems that way. But, it's what I love is, though, there is a recipe. So, as moms, we always think about diets. Can we cheat on our diet? Can we do this? Can we do that? So families that are listening and watching, we can't cheat, but there is a recipe, there is a protocol, and somebody's been doing this way before most of us. Bob has been in this field for 50 years and helping families. And it's just amazing if you just kind of follow that path, and he'll guide you. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to even create our own path. What's awesome about it is that they can help you customize where your child's at by still wanting more. And it doesn't matter their age. One of the reasons I wanted to do this interview so much was because obviously I have a son who's 19. I'm a big believer that age, you're capable of anything at any age. Like you always say this, and I use this quote often, you are capable of limitless growth at any age. And I 100,000,000% believe that. And I think that every family out there that has a child, especially older, we've been told the window closes, there's no help after the age of 8. And that is not true. I have seen my son develop even in the last year. And Bob knows where I was even a few years ago. And so it's amazing to watch our kids and what they can do and what their brains can do. So I want to ask you another tough question here. As we're talking, what is the potential of a child on the spectrum, and what can we hope for? I know you said it's easier to work with kids when they're younger, but for a lot of kiddos out there, we might not have known about you at a certain age, right? They might be 18, they might be 25, they might even be 30.
The good news is, as long as we're breathing, neuroplasticity exists. So there's not a point at which you have to pull the plug and say, oh, we can't get any more. We're done. As long as you can, again, identify the needs of the whole individual, work with the foundation. And again, you can't cheat. You know you want to be here, but if you're here, you got to go from there to there to there. If you do that at any point, you're going to get more function. That adult can do better,
Mhm.
but you have to do it the right way.
I love that. And there's always hope. There doesn't matter the age. And, you know, it matters in the sense of if you're somebody that just got that diagnosis, maybe your child's 2, 3, 4, and you're brand new and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? I will say this. I wish I knew what I know today back then, but I don't. I didn't, I should say. So I really feel like you're in a much better seat in the sense you're not going to, you know, try this, try this, try this, and then find NACD when, you know, you're 15 or something. But saying that, I don't care if you're 15, I don't care if you're 25, I don't even care if you're 40. I totally believe that the brain is so powerful. Everything I've learned from Bob is just like I said it earlier, it blows my mind. You know, I often think about grandparents, like, you know, that I'm even thinking of my own grandmother, you know, so many of our grandparents might end up having a stroke, or, you know, a loved one has a stroke. And I remember being a kid, and I've said this in many of my lectures, but, you know, as a kid, if someone had a stroke, that was it. Like if they lost the ability to speak or their ability to move their arms, you would feel so sad for them. You'd say, oh my gosh, that's so sad. Today, how many of us know people that have had strokes, and doesn't matter their age, and recovery, they can talk, they can walk, they can move. You would have no idea that they even went through what they went through, which all that tells me is that it's possible and our brains are capable. So if a person in their 80s can figure out how to help that part of their brain, what do you think somebody that's a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old with autism can do if you're being given the tools and the guide to know how to help that person? So that's what keeps me going every day with my digit spans. Because we do digit spans. You know, we're trying for our 6s. We're still at about 5. Sometimes we every now and then get lucky with the 6, but we started with 2, you know, and so it's one of those things that you have to be patient and you have to just keep going, and you just have to believe it's going to get there. And it does.
And Kristen, as you've experienced, just a step from a 2 to a 3 or a 3 to a 4 is huge in terms of what that produces. I mean, think in terms of the difference between a 2-year-old kid and a 4-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's gargantuan.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that 2-year-old is trying to put 1 and 2 words together, and you have conversations with that 4-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So every one of those steps in terms of the global development of the individual is gargantuan.
Well, I am just forever grateful for learning about this program and learning about you and all the amazing things you do for my kiddo. And as those that are watching or listening, you know, how do they find you? How do they learn more about you? I know you guys can watch YouTube stuff because he has a whole bunch of YouTube things, but you could do that at 2:00 in the morning when your kiddos are asleep. But how do they reach you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, the easiest way to go to our site, nacd.org. And we've got hundreds of articles and videos and information for you to get in touch with us. There's a mountain of stuff you can learn just by going to our site.
And I love that, because many families out there, if they're like me, at least, it's usually around 1 or 2 in the morning, you know, when my brain is able to say, okay, the house is quiet. This is, you know, when I can do some research sometimes. And so I love that, you know, today we do have that technology where you can just, most of us have our phones, and you can just, you know, jump on your phone, go on the site. And even if you just watch one video, you know, per day and learn one thing, and then give them a call, get a consult, and see how to do, you know,
and if you want to, you know, get involved with us, as in have us, you know, do an evaluation on your child, design a program for you just go to the Get Started section on our site, and it'll take you through the steps.
And you work with families all over the world, because I know about 170 countries chime into the library. So it doesn't matter where you live in the world, correct?
It doesn't, because we can work in person. We work over Skype. You know, I just got back from 2 weeks in Romania. We've got kids all over the planet, and you know, the wonders of where we are today is we can work with anyone, anywhere.
I love that. What message do you want to leave with families right now, especially if they're sitting there going, gosh, you know what? I have a 19-year-old or I have a 26-year-old and I'm so excited to learn more, but I still feel nervous or sad or hopeless.
You know, parents, number one, you are the world's greatest authority on your child, all right? And work with people who respect that and acknowledge that and work with you. And believe the potential is there in every one of your kids, right? It's not going to be easy, all right? Don't pretend, don't let anybody tell you, oh, gee, I've got this easy solution for you. No, it's hard work, but if you're willing to do the work, do what you need to do, your child's potential is unlimited. Believe it.
At any age.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate taking the time. I always love talking with you. And thank you guys for watching. And remember what Bob said, you know, the possibilities are endless. And don't forget, at any age, you just got to put the work in and never give up. So thank you guys for watching. And thank you again, Bob. Until next time.
Thank you.